Well, now we can speak to Nader Hashemi, who is director of the Centre for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver, joins us from London via Skype. Mr. Hashemi, what do you say about these reports that are coming through that Bouteflika is preparing to resign at some point early next week?
Well, I think it's important to realize that President Abdelaziz Bouteflika is in a comatose state. No one has heard him speak for roughly the last 6 years. He's clearly not the person in control of the Algerian state. And so claims that he's being prepared or is preparing himself to step down has to be taken with a grain of salt. It's really the Algerian military and the deep state and a coalition of corrupt politicians that are in charge of the political system in Algeria. And it's pretty clear from watching things over the last several weeks, particularly in the last few days, there's deep confusion and incoherence and uncertainty among the ruling elite in Algeria over how to respond to these ongoing public protests. Right.
Well, nevertheless, Bouteflika is the figurehead, isn't he? And there are these fairly sweeping changes that have been brought in. Will that be enough for the millions of protesters we've seen on the streets?
No, because I would dispute the claim that these are sweeping changes. I mean, this is really just a cabinet. The recent announcement is just really a reshuffling of the ruling elites to make it seem like things are changing. But as you indicated in your question, it's pretty clear that the people on the street don't want to replace Tweedledee with Tweedledum. They want a complete, comprehensive, radical transformation of Algerian politics away from authoritarianism and toward a real democracy. And how they'll be able to obtain that, remains to be seen.
So what do you think the next steps will be for the governments, given that they're making some apparent concessions, but yet you say they still want to maintain power? How are they going to accede to the demands of the protesting masses while still retaining power?
Well, my big concern here is that we're going to see some sort of offer from the ruling elites in charge of Algeria towards some sort of election that will allow perhaps some civilian politician to come to office while real power remains in the military, in the deep state. In other words, my big fear is that there could be some sort of, Egyptian scenario, and I'm talking about Egypt after the fall of Hosni Mubarak, where the military took a step back in response to popular protests, allowed for civilians to assume some nominal control of the political system, but then just biding their time, the military that is, biding their time for an opportunity to stage another military coup. I think that's one likely scenario. It really depends on the people in the street, the opposition that is forming. To what extent will they be willing to accept cosmetic changes? It seems like they're saying they want all of these ruling characters removed from the political system and a new caretaker government made up of independent politicians who have not been in power to assume a transition to democracy. So I think that's where we are at this moment.
All right, you mentioned the opposition there just a moment ago. The problem is that the opposition parties, which range from socialist to Islamist, they're known to be deeply divided, and they haven't sort of managed to coalesce to form a definitive opposition against the regime.
I agree. I think that's also one of the complicating problems. We don't see, I think, here a clear sort of platform or manifesto from people who are on the street and their representatives laying out a clear roadmap in terms of what their demands are. That has to do with what you just alluded to, that there is division within the ranks, in part because of the severe repression. I mean, Algeria has been a deeply repressive state. There hasn't been freedom of association for people to organize and mobilize. But I think that's coming together. We are seeing individual groups starting to enunciate clear demands. But I think that is something to watch for. I think the more that there are divisions among the opposition, the more that benefits the authoritarian status quo.
Nader Hashemi, it's just great to get your perspective. Appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.